Yo, 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 what's up, party people? Welcome to another episode of Thrive and Dive, thriving in life by diving into deeper conversations. The purpose of this show is to help you thrive, and we have a guest that's been on before, back on the pod. We've got Dawson Johnson in the house. How are you, Dawson?
Hello. Good. Excited to be back. It's been a little bit, but, we're back.
We're back, baby. Back and better than ever. And the reason you had a hiatus was the birth of your second child. Tell us a little bit about that, if you don't mind.
Yeah. No, he's been good. His name is Riley. He was born February 20th. So he's just turned over 3 months. It's been good. The adjustment from 1 to 2 actually hasn't been too bad. I would say, at least in my opinion, the first one, I think is like a culture shock, right? You just hit with somebody you've never experienced before. Second one, because everything's logistically the same, you just had to jumble a few different things. But other than that, he's been really good.
Yeah, you're like, this ain't my first rodeo. I know.
Yeah.
I could take it all now.
Yeah, but he hasn't started walking or crawling.
Okay.
I think because, once we put him down,
Yeah.
I can leave, come back, and he's still there. As soon as he starts to crawl and I look away and he's gone, I think that's when I'm going to, I'm going to have to swallow my words. Yeah.
Speaking too soon.
Yeah,
Yeah. Wait a couple months. But that's awesome, man. Congratulations. And glad to have you back on the pod to talk about all things leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So Thrive and Divers, if you're new to the show, there's 3 kind of main conversations I have here on Thrive and Dive. We talk Bible study. We got a series through the book of John right now. Be sure to check that out. We do testimonies, just have different people on sharing their story. And the third element is leadership content, because this podcast is designed for you to thrive. And I personally believe that if you can be a good leader, or if you can recognize good leadership, you can start to thrive in every area of life. And leadership actually starts with you. You might not think you're a leader, but you are a leader. You influence yourself at the least, and at most, you might have a team or one person that you're influencing, and that's something we got to steward. So we've been in the book of, I want to say the book of John. That's a different episode. We're not going in the book of John, unless Dawson has some thoughts from the book of John, maybe. But we're in a book called The Way of the Shepherd by Kevin Leman and Bill Pentak, and this is our 5th episode, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you have not seen the previous 4 episodes, I would encourage you to go back and find those on Spotify or YouTube, because we're just going to continue, jump right back into the book. And this book's been all about leadership and how to lead like a shepherd, hence the title. And today we are discussing chapter 6 of this book, or chapter 5 of this book. And the title of this chapter, Dawson, is The Staff of Direction.
Yeah, this is a good one.
Talk to us about the staff of direction.
Yeah, this one really made me, I feel like I say that about all the chapters. This one really...
we're consistent about this.
Yeah. It's just a good book, but this one really made me have to really stop and just think about what I read, because as we go through the points, everything that you read in this chapter about leadership and how just lead your team in different directions, lead your herd, everything just goes against what culture tells you about. It's talking about leading through encouragement, through love.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times I think a lot about just sports, because I was an athlete back in the day.
Still are.
I try.
This guy trains every day before work.
I have 2 kids. I gotta keep up with them.
They can't outrun you.
Yeah. But I don't know. I just, a lot of the best teams that you heard of, a lot of them, trained or worked hard through the fear of some kind of punishment. So, if you don't make it at work, or if you don't make it practice on time, you have to run. If you don't play good enough, you have to run. If you don't do this, you have to run. And I think that can correlate to a lot of just, even in corporate places, if you mess up once, you're fired. If you don't, and all of that just makes you have this fear of just whatever it is, but you're basically being motivated through fear. You're not really being motivated because you necessarily respect your leader. You're being motivated out of the fear that something's going to happen to you and you're not safe. And this chapter really made me think, because even I didn't realize that a lot of what was the opposite of this book is what I, just thought of leadership. I thought you need some kind of fear with your employees to have them respect you. Otherwise, and I just really had to rewire the way I was thinking. I was like, you know what? That is wrong, because whenever if a soccer player is only driven through fear of running and this and that, if they're on their own or if they're done with the sport, then what's really motivating them? It's not to get better because they've always been wired that I need to do X, Y, and Z because I don't want to run. I need to start. I need to do X. And then when they get on their own, they don't like, what are they motivated from?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And you're speaking to the difference between internal motivation and external motivation. The common stereotype of a leader is, cutthroat, to the point, commanding respect. And that could work. And there's places where that does work. I think of the military, from what I hear.
Mm-hmm.
I've never been in the military. You could probably be in the military you could probably handle boot camp with all that training you do. But for me, nope, not a chance. My time has passed for that opportunity. But I imagine that venue is that command culture, cutthroat, external motivation is a huge way they do things. But that's not prescriptive to every environment of leadership.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very niche field, if you will.
Yeah.
Because of what's at stake, really.
Yeah.
So, but that doesn't transfer to managing a team. If you work at a church or if you work at a university like Warner University, like where we both work, even at the athletic arena, there could be some differences of opinion. Maybe there's some coaches that have results based on the cutthroat, put the fear of God in people.
Mm-hmm.
But again, even that is such a small percentage, and I would probably tuck that away to, the more military style leadership. But for the majority of us people that aren't that cutthroat, we need to be leading in such a way that we're causing internal motivation to well up in our people and our teams, like you were saying, right? Because external motivation, fear of punishment or a desire for rewards can work temporarily, but it doesn't bring that lasting respect, loyalty, and productivity that internal motivation does. And internal motivation being, I respect you as my leader, Dawson. I want to do my best for you and ultimately for us, for the Lord in a Christian context. But it's internal. It's not fear-based. It's love-based, really.
Mm-hmm.
Not to get lovey-dovey on the show, but really, you love and respect your leader. That's a good thing.
Yeah. And I think that's, and it goes in, it gives some examples, and we can dive in.
Yeah.
But we'll dive in and we'll talk about it.
Let's do it. Let's dive in. You were mentioning before we went on air that you just have a bunch of questions concerning this chapter. Do you want to kind of unpack this chapter Q&A style, and we both can answer your questions that you got thoughts on?
Yeah, you sort of hit my sort of thoughts on it right there with the external, internal. What I was really thinking is, yes, there are times that you need to, honestly, like the military, they have to be cutthroat because their lives are at stake and people's lives are at stake. If they aren't essentially perfect, people can die. Mm-hmm. And that's, so in a way, they have to be sort of cutthroat with how they do things. And I guess my biggest thing is, I generally think, and this is why I want to ask you what your opinion was. I generally do think that certain leaderships in that space also can be compared to a workspace like at Warner. But what I was going to essentially ask is, I think you can be both, but at the core, your leader has to like love you. And I think that's why they even use in the book, I think Piatek, he said that he worked at a job once where the manager, anytime something went wrong, would just tear into them. Anytime they just tearing into them. And even when things are good, it was all about the manager. Everything was all about the manager. It's like, I think when you think of the military, they're obviously cutthroat. They're giving orders, stuff like that. But there is a difference in terms of that motivation. And that's my thing is, do you think that at the core, you can have that, hey, you're going to run, hey, you're going to do X, Y, and Z, as long as it comes from a place of love and wanting the best for your people?
Yeah. I think it can be a both and. Obviously, again, no military experience, seeing how leadership is done in that regard. I do have a friend who was in the Marines, and he's, I think, pretty high up now in terms of that. So I'd be curious to hear his take. Maybe we can have him on the pod sometime. He lives in Tampa, I think. So
okay,
maybe we can get him. Yeah, shout out to you if you're ever listening. You know who you are. But I think with the military specifically, they have such high standards, right? And we talked about this when Joel was with us on the pod, that just because we care and we should encourage our leaders doesn't mean we don't have high standards.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not a false dichotomy where you either have high standards or you just, we just love each other here, We don't get anything done, but we sure love each other, and our boss loves us and we love our boss, right? Yeah, I think you can marry the two. having high standard while also demonstrating your care for your team. And because I think in the military, again, using that illustration, I think the sergeant or the colonel, whatever, cares for their privates and whatever the rankings are. And that's why they're so hard on them. Like we care too much about you to see you fail on this mission, because if you fail, you die. And that's why we have such cutthroat style of leadership. I think there is genuine care as well. So I don't think you have to sacrifice both. I think my time as a teacher, I tried to have high standards in the classroom with my students on, assignments, tests. Like my tests weren't easy, I don't think. I mean, you can ask my brother who works for you in the admissions department. He was my student for 4 years in high school. I had high standards, but I made sure I still cared for my students. It wasn't like, a prison cell coming to my class. I think both can be had, to answer your question.
Yeah. And I think as we dive into this chapter, I think that's like the one core thing that I really had to learn about is you can be hard, but looking back, people will respect if you care. And that's why a lot of even him in this example, and even just my experience, some of the people that have pushed me to my limits, one of them is my, I think back to like my assistant soccer coach back in high school. I believe he was an ex-military guy. So was actually my current, not soccer coach. He was Drew Stacy. He also was in the military.
Yep. Shout out to Drew Stacy if you're watching.
Yeah. Also Drew Stacy. So I had two actually people, soccer coaches that were military. The one in high school, I remember just the way that he like communicated and things like that. He was really, really hard, and he was always known from every student as sort of that like cutthroat guy. But the one thing that I appreciated about that approach is that you could tell that he cared though. And that was always like the biggest thing for me, is that he really got to know my family. He really got to know me and my potential. He would check up on me, push me, but all of that, I do think you can have that. And honestly, I kind of like that approach as well, pushing people to their potential. And you actually had talk of that in chapel. I remember a few weeks back. I think you can be that way. And I think you should be that way. As long as you have it at that, core that you are doing it out of love and not out of, I'm going to do this for my gain, And
making sure that you communicate with your team that you do care, because you in your heart of hearts might know that they care, but they can't read your mind. So just throwing that in there, like, guys, I'm doing this because I care about you. And how you demonstrate your care is your personality. Some people love, I can't think of an example on top of my head, maybe giving gifts or words of encouragement or time off or whatever. Maybe how you demonstrate your care to your employees is determined on you and your policies. But so with that all being said, we're talking about the staff of direction. That's the title of this chapter. And Newman the story, uses, again, if you have not read the book, it's like a narrative. It's a storytelling type book, which makes it so memorable because we remember stories better than just straight up principles. But in the story, the person who was discipling, if you will, the student, the professor was discipling the student that's about to graduate and join a business where he's going to be a leader instantly. He was talking about the shepherd's staff as a symbol of good leadership, and the staff symbolizes 4 things that a leader must do. And the first one is the staff represents your responsibility to direct your people. Your thoughts on that, Dawson?
Yeah, I think it's important, and I think that's honestly the first thing that you should do. I haven't been in really any so-called like leadership roles. Well, I guess I have, not in terms of like business related, but like obviously I'm married, so that, and I have children, so that would be considered a leadership role. I was on the soccer team and now I was a captain, so that can be looked at as a leadership role. But I think that's the one most important thing to prioritize right off the bat is knowing where you're going, because I don't think that there's any. It's very hard following someone that doesn't know where they're going.
It's like a roller coaster ride sometimes.
Yeah, imagine hopping up in a car and you're like, "Hey, where are we going?" They're like, "You're not going to feel very confident, right?" So establishing that direction is very, very important first and foremost.
Yeah, because the rod, when it comes to the shepherd analogy, right? The shepherd knows where he's taking the sheep, and he's taking think of the story in the Bible, the 99, so 100 sheep, that's a lot of sheep, right?
Mhm.
If you don't know where you're going and all the sheep are following you, it's like the amount of work it takes to like reroute 100 sheep, like just to turn around, right? It's probably a whole labor intensive act. So knowing beforehand where we're going as a leader is super important. And that talks about, having a vision. We've talked about this before, probably in other chapters, and most leadership books talk about, a leader needs to be 3 steps ahead and is able to direct the sheep, which then leads to the second principle that comes from this shepherd analogy, is that the second function of the staff is to establish boundaries. Talk about that, Austin.
Yeah, they go on in the book about it, but the boundaries, I think, sometimes can be looked at as a negative thing, but I personally think that boundaries are really important, as in the book it talks about as well, because boundaries allow you to see the area that you can move and operate in. And I think if you give too many boundaries, that can be leading towards micromanagement. And no one likes to micromanage, someone that's always breathing down your neck. I know that sometimes, depending on certain, levels of responsibility, things that are higher at stake, you're going to have a little bit more of micromanagement, just because we keep using the military example, right? But like, I would expect, I've never been, but I've heard a lot of stories, listened to a lot of podcasts. In that sort of a scenario, you would have to be a little bit more, especially towards the beginning, just so that people really understand, hey, this is what's at stake. But for this example in the book, it seems like he's just talking more so, hey, you need to set your boundaries as a leader so your people or your staff or whoever knows where they can operate. Not necessarily to where they feel confined, where they feel like they can't be free, they can't be themselves, but you do have to give boundaries. Hey, you can do this, but I can't have you do this because of this example. For my kids, I can say, hey, you can play here, but when the stove is on, I can't have you in the kitchen because you're going to burn yourself. But you have this whole area, so my daughter, she's the only one that can walk out of the two right now. But, so she knows, hey, I can operate, I can have fun and do this, but this is the one thing I can't have you have. And I think that's a good boundary, right? Yeah. Because me, who's the leader, thinking a lot of steps ahead, if she comes over here, she's going to burn herself, and that's going to be that's going to be a lasting injury. So it goes on and gives some examples in the book, but I think that's the main thing. Is boundaries are a good thing if used wisely.
Absolutely. And in addition to boundaries being protective in nature, like the stove analogy you used, I think boundaries, as the book talks about, keeps us focused on the main mission as well. Because in my experience, one of the biggest threats to accomplishing a mission is pursuing another side mission at the same time and getting, the next sparkly thing, like grabs your attention. Like, oh, what if we did that? Oh, what if we did that? But then we forgot what the main mission was and we end up not accomplishing anything. So boundaries keeps us focused, right? We are not going to dream about the next initiative. We're not going to think about the next year or think about, this new flashy thing that we saw on an advertisement, right? No, we're going to go back to the boring basics, right? That's the thing. As someone who likes to invent, that's one of my personality types, according to the Working Genius Assessment put on by Patrick Lencioni in the Table Group. Encourage you guys to check that out if you don't know where your Working Genius Assessment is. But I'm an inventor according to that, which means I like to create new things. But the downside to that is moving on from the thing that was already created and getting bored, right? Wow, I want to do something new. But no, sometimes you gotta be bored at work, right? You gotta, in order to pursue the mission, you gotta do the simplistic things, maybe daily, weekly, for a month until it's accomplished. And as grueling as that is, the boundaries that are set in place will allow us to accomplish said thing.
Yeah. And I think even in the book, it talks about how sheep, in a way, like you're saying, can get bored if it's the same task, if the boundaries are so confined. That's one of the reasons why in the book it talks about how there's this pasture that they were going by, and the sheep were just in awful shape. It was someone else's pasture. And one of the reasons that they said that why they're in such bad shape is because the boundaries were so limited, and the shepherd wasn't there to guide them and expand that boundary so they can go to other green pasture, so they can feed off of other things. If you're only ever saying, hey, James, I need you to, I don't know, only talk to these people every day, every day for the rest of your life. For the rest of the time you work here at Warner, I can only have you talk to these 2 students. you're gonna do that to the best of your abilities, but it's gonna be
Yeah.
hard. But imagine if they're like, hey, actually, I'm gonna extend this. You can be in charge of all these 100 students. You know,
Yeah.
that's expanding the boundary, but you can get a little more out of it.
Yeah, and I have a personal story of that. Back in my Chick-fil-A days in high school, when I was working in the kitchen on my first, 2 weeks on the job, honestly, the first month on the job, I was in the same position every day, and there's literally just buttering the buns and passing it on to the next guy who's going to make the sandwich. I did that for, I think, a month straight. And I'm like, oh my goodness. Like I know there's boundaries and I got to learn things, but at the same time, so again, some of these things are attention to be balanced. We give boundaries and focus, but at the same time, we give enough liberty for people to be creative, to learn, and to do new things. And I don't want to just come off judgmental if my former Chick-fil-A managers are listening. I doubt they are, but maybe, you never know. Part of the reason why there's strict boundaries is because of laziness on the leader. It's easier just to, oh, James, your buns. Like, I don't have to think about where to put you in a new position. I don't have to train you in a new position. That's more work for me. You're good at buns. Keep doing the buns, right? So a leader that's worth the salt is willing to allow a employee to have some freedom, flexibility, and creativity to try something new. There's risk to that, right? If I put James off of buns, he might fail in a different position, and then that's going to look bad on me, and then I'm going to have to train him. And again, if you're a good leader, you're willing to take the risk. You're willing to give that extra time and care to help someone in a new dream of theirs. Becomes more messy. That's kind of how leadership is. You got to be able to get messy.
And to the first point, let's say that you are stuck to that. A good leader will consistently remind you of the direction that you're going and give you that confidence as to why you're so important to the role. That's actually a few chapters prior. I remember we talked about the importance of just consistently reminding people of your message. But yeah, I think that's also the importance of leader is, let's say that is your role. Same thing as if my wife worked at Publix and she was a bagger for a year. That in itself can sometimes get boring. I just imagine, just because you're there, singing a line, having a bag. But that's also why it's important as a leader. If you have people like that are in certain tests, like that's just what you have to do if you're at a supermarket, if you work at a supermarket. That's why it's important for a leader to make sure just to remind everyone that this is the direction we need to go. These are the boundaries. And then just consistently communicating with them, checking up on them to make sure that they're performing to their best,
Yeah, love it. With that being said, let's get to the third thing that the staff represents. And that is it rescues stranded sheep. The staff represents the rescue of stranded sheep because I guess I've never been a shepherd, but it's got the hook, the candy cane hook onto the end of the stick that's used to grab the sheep from the death and dreary places they crawled into. So talk to us about how to rescue stranded sheep practically.
Yeah. This one was actually one that I had to think a little bit of, because sometimes when he gives analogies and things like this, I'm like, okay, how does that work in real life? Because all I can imagine right now is just rescuing a sheep.
Yeah. We're talking about Dawson. You don't rescue ambassadors.
Well, that's what I've had to think. I'm like, well, okay, how do I translate this to the actual
driving that golf cart too fast?
Yeah. But no, our ambassadors are great. Jason, I'm kidding. I'm kidding, Jason. Jason obviously is one of the flames. He's great. Jason does a great job. That's no lie. He's actually very, very good. Killed it his first year. The staff though, I think is very, very important. And one of the good examples it gives is that it's needed as a leader to go and pull out and find your people that are in trouble. And the example it gives in the book is they were asking, hey, what happens if one of your sheep goes out and you can't find it, because sometimes the boundaries that you give your employees, one of them might, obviously sneak out of it, kind of like a teenager. You obviously give boundaries, but sometimes those teenagers are going to push those boundaries a little bit. You maybe get themselves into trouble. What do you do as a leader? And he said the example is, well, if I lose a sheep, I got to go and find him, because that's my job as a shepherd, right? If my job is to love these people, to help them get to their potential, to help lead them to the Lord, I have to go and find them and get them out of trouble, because that's my job. And so in the book, they use that staff to, help if there's a sheep that's stuck in a tree, getting the tree out of the way and putting it around the neck so you can pull pull sheep out. I think in leadership, that's also important because in the perfect world, you're going to have a leader that's going to show you the way. There's going to be set boundaries, and no one's going to go around those, right? No one's going to try to expand those boundaries. Everyone's going to stay in limits, but we all know that's impossible. We're all human, right?
Yeah.
So that staff part is just important. That piece of the staff to go out and help them get those people, help them get out of that trouble, to then bring them back within the boundary and get them back on track.
And again, this is where your level of care for your team must be integral to your motivation for being a leader. Because if you develop an attitude of like, Johnny, you messed up again.
Yeah.
Come on, man, get it right.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just gonna be so annoyed, right? But instead, if you care about, I'm like, oh man, Johnny messed up. I'm gonna help him. He's deflated. He's discouraged now. I'm gonna encourage him, which actually leads to the fourth responsibility. But yeah, you gotta have that care. If you don't have the care for your team, it's gonna be such a drag.
Honestly, and it's so important. But that little response, I think is the definitive point on whether or not you care truly about someone. Because if you have that reaction like, oh, all right, here we go again, you're clearly not caring about that person, you know? And I know that, like, I don't know, I just think of parents all the time. I just think of parents and having kids that, you know, you set clear boundaries and kids just somehow wind up.
Your kid's not perfect, Dawson.
Right.
Always stays in the boundaries.
Honestly, one of our boundaries, Charlotte's potty trained now, and we have extended a boundary to letting her go to the bathroom by herself because, you know, she knows how to go potty. She doesn't need my help to get her there anymore. And I thought, you know, that's a very clear boundary. You can now go in the bathroom by yourself. You can go to the bathroom and then come back. And then we go there, and the boundary is to go to the bathroom and come back. And she hasn't been there in a little bit. And we're hearing the water splashing. We're like, it's water. She's not tall enough to reach the sink. We go in there, and she's playing in the water of the toilet. And I was like, oh, no.
Little Wet and Wild action.
Yeah. But same thing right there. Like, we gave a set boundary.
Yeah.
Kids are going to be kids. People are going to be people. People are going to...
people don't just change once they grow older. They're still a kid inside.
Yeah. So what was my job? I could have, you know, tore into her, this and that. But would that have made her really learn or make it seem like I really care about her? No. I had to explain why this boundary might not lead you to success, right?
Yeah.
You can potentially get really dirty if you do this. You know, you can get sick. You know, you can't play with this. So yeah, that was just an example of mine, but that is a very, very important part of leadership where if you do care about someone, it is going to show in how you react whenever people get in trouble.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Which does lead us to our fourth responsibility and what the staff represents. The staff represents the shepherd's responsibility to encourage his flock. We touched on this already, but any other thoughts on that last responsibility?
This was the one, looking back, this is the one that stuck with me the most. And I was actually going to ask you what your take on this was because I don't know. I guess being a human being, control is very, very hard to let go of. I think with everybody. I think every single person has some kind of control problem. I just think that's just like the simple way. It's very hard to say, hey, you know what? I can't do this on my own. I need help, you know? So I was actually curious what your take in this is, because in my view, if just leaders and if you want to be successful, it's very hard from the way that it seemed as they would be explained in the book, where it says to like encourage, don't with the staff. It was like use the end part to not necessarily like jab people. Yeah. So that comes from that fear. Hey, I need you to do this but more so like, hey, just nudge them like, hey, how about you do this? Like, I'd encourage you to try it this way. That to me leaves a lot of room up for failure. And so that might something that I probably have to learn about. But what was your take on leading with encouragement?
Yeah, I'd say what I've observed in my own personal experience working at Warner, I have a team of students that work under me. And one of the responsibilities is overseeing our marketing on our Instagram page, Spiritual Life Instagram page. And I legit like don't micromanage one bit. I don't know if that's partly because it was my first year on the job and I didn't have time to micromanage, or I was a great leader and didn't micromanage. I don't know. It could have been an accidental good leadership, but I'd like to think that I gave them this responsibility. I gave them this authority, right? We're delegating not just responsibility, we're delegating authority. The difference between delegating tasks and delegating authority. Task is I'm just doing what James wants done. Authority is he's giving me this project and I get to decide what's done. And then when I do that, though, there are times where I'm like, oh, I need to provide some constructive criticism, some encouragement, if you will. How do I give it in such a way that I'm not just, all right, I'm taking over. You guys' ideas, trash, right?
Diminishing.
And this has hardly happened if you're watching my Spiritual Life team. You guys rock it. But if there's a sense where like, I want it done this way, how do I still... because I don't want to be manipulative or fake it. Like you have authority, but you don't really have authority because I'm going to come in and totally change if I don't like it, right? So that I don't want to, I don't want to be fake in that way. Like I gave you authority. So I usually, in this instance, and this is probably different for everyone's context, but I'm like, hey, if you guys are down to do this, right? Could we do this instead of this? And I like to think when I say like, if you're down to do it, or if it seems reasonable to you, I'm giving them a say in the matter. Part of me worries that because it's coming from me, they're going to disagree regardless, right? Like, oh yeah, we're down to do that. But I really hope I've instilled a culture that you can push back against my ideas, right? So this is a thing that we've got to train in our teams, right? If you all of a sudden, if you've been demanding your way or the highway for like a whole year, and then you're like, I really want them to take ownership and autonomy over this project. But in their mind, you've been demanding the past year, like, where you fool me once, shame on you. Me, fool me twice, shame on you, kind of thing. So if I've cultivated a culture of encouragement where we can have healthy conflict and disagree with each other, and we'll kind of see which idea pans out, and they have the opportunity to speak out in staff meetings that we have on a monthly basis. I think I've cultivated a culture to where. So I have an idea. I want them to change something. I want to encourage them to change something. I'm like, hey guys, if you're cool with this, if it seems reasonable to you, I'd like to see this done. I would like to think that they would challenge me if they don't think it's reasonable, right? I'm giving them that opportunity, as opposed to, hey guys, I don't like it this way. Can we change it to this?
Yeah.
So it's one's more demanding, one's more like, let's collaborate. So
yeah, I kind of like that. It's kind of like you actually helped me understand a little bit more. But you said earlier that you are an inventor.
Yeah.
So if that is something that you're just naturally good at, inventing things, coming up with ideas, things like that, like you said, that could lead to you wanting to do a lot, but might not stick to one idea. That's what you said earlier, right?
Yeah, sure.
Because if you start completing one thing, well, you come up with an idea, you're on to the next one. Someone that might not be leading with encouragement might be like, James, I've told you so many times, I need you to stick to one. You can't invent anything else. I need you to stick to this. Bang. That, I think, almost is putting out your light that the Lord has gifted you, that little thing that you're just naturally good at, that you can use to help bring people to Lord, to encourage people to go to Lord. Use that talent to glorify God. I think with encouragement, be like, hey, James, you're doing great things. You clearly have a lot of amazing ideas. We need that. But what I need you to do is just stick with this for right now, because if you're not going to stick with this, this thing's never going to get done,
Yeah.
So I think one diminishes and makes people not necessarily feel confident to be themselves, and it almost restricts that sort of boundary that we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And that was actually a really good explanation.
Yeah, no. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, I think, again, if a leader's worth its salt, which I think my leader is, shout out to Kevin if you're watching, is that every strength comes with a weakness, right? My inventor strength comes with the weakness of wanting to move on, which is actually a bad example, because if you know the Working Genius, there's a thing called tenacity, which is on the other side of the the linear equation, if you will. It's like a step-by-step process. And I have tenacity, which means I can't stand unfinished things. So it's an interesting combo where I like to vent, but also don't like unfinished things. So that's how I burn myself out. I was like, I can't stand it when I start something, I can't finish it. And I start too many things, right? But some people will have inventions, but don't have tenacity. So that's kind of what we're addressing. So, but let's just say I am that. I don't have tenacity. I can't finish things, right? I get bored. I want to move on to the next thing. I think a leader is worth the salt. Be like, James, I know it's really hard for you not to invent. Like, you recognize it, but I need you to not invent, right?
Yeah.
It's like recognizing that this is hard for me. So coming to your, like, I know it's hard for you, Dawson, to do X, but I need you to do it.
Yeah.
And I think noticing, empathizing with my weakness while giving an expectation is different than, James, stop inventing. You need to focus. Like, no, it's all about approach.
Yeah. And there's a lot of movies like that where you'll see maybe a teacher, professor, coach see a kid that is just known for just being an issue, right? And everyone sort of toss them to the side. Yeah, he's just a hard person to deal with. He's not going anywhere. And I think it does take a really effective leader to see a few steps ahead where, well, why is he difficult? But what is he also giving? You know, he might be really hard-headed, but he clearly works hard. So something for encouragement would be not necessarily putting down him in general and just diminishing everything, because he still is a human being, or she, they're still a human being that can give something to the world. Yeah. And I think about, there's let me bring up soccer person, but I think this can be just translated anywhere. There's this really, really well-known player named Neymar. You know him, but he's just this really flashy guy. And a lot of people, I could see a lot of approaches to coaching. Like, all he does is try to beat people. All he tries to do is all this flashy stuff, this and that. And I can really see someone that wouldn't be leading with encouragement be like, Neymar, that's it. You're not going to dribble anymore. You're not going to do any of these flashy stuff. I just need you to take the ball and just pass it. That's it. That's diminishing his skill, his ability, his light that he's able to give. So a way to encourage would be, hey, this is amazing. But instead of trying to dribble maybe 4, just try to recognize, hey, I need to know when to pass. But don't necessarily stop doing what you're good at. Just need to understand when to do and when not to do, you know? So that's actually, I think, a really, really good point. I like that.
Love it.
I'll have to dive in a little bit more on that chapter, yeah.
I know, so much meaty content. With that being said, we'll probably bring this to a close. But the last point when it comes to the encouragement, also another dimension of the encouragement is also just when you see good work, call it out. Like, oh, good job. You did really good. Even if it's like kind of a mundane thing and like they're paid to do that, right? It's their job. Just congratulate them. Say, because that goes a long way. You, and I struggle with this. Like, everyone, we're just doing our job. This is what we get paid to do. But you can still say good job.
Yeah, speak life.
Yeah, speak life. Absolutely. So to recap, there's 4 responsibilities that the staff represents. Firstly, it's your responsibility to direct your people. Secondly, it's to establish boundaries. Thirdly, is to rescue your stranded sheep. And fourthly, is to encourage your flock. So if you're a leader, which is everybody, even if you're just leading yourself, I encourage you to put these 4 things into practice. But Dawson, good to have you back, brother.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, looking forward to finishing out this book with you. With that being said, thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoyed this episode and you're watching on YouTube, be sure to smash that like button. If you really enjoy the content, be sure to subscribe. And if you're listening on Spotify and you haven't followed us yet, that would be super helpful for us. And if you really enjoyed this episode, be sure to give it a 5-star rating. But until then, we'll see you at the next episode. This is Thrive and Dive, Thriving in Life by diving into deeper conversations.